Now, during the events of Star Wars: Return of the Jedi. Fear is a useful thing. That was one of the best lessons that a bounty hunter could learn, and Bossk was learning it now. Through the cockpit viewport of the Houndstooth, he saw the explosion that ripped the other ship, Boba Fett's Slave One, into flame and shards of blackened durasteel. A burst of wideband comlink static like an electromagnetic death cry had simultaneously deafened Bossk. When he could finally hear himself think again, Bossk looked out at the empty space where Slave One had been. "He's dead," thought Bossk with immense satisfaction. "At last." Before transferring back here to his own ship, Bossk had wired up enough thermal explosives in Slave One to reduce any living thing aboard it to mere ash and bad memories. The silence of the Hound's cockpit was broken by a barely audible pinging signal from the control panel. Bossk glanced down and saw that the Hound's telesponder had picked up the presence of another ship in the immediate vicinity. According to the coordinates that appeared in the readout screen, it was almost on top of the Houndstooth. And it was the ship known as Slave One. The ID profile was an exact match. "That's impossible," thought Bossk, bewildered. His heart shuddered to a halt inside his chest, then staggered on. Before the explosion, he had picked up the same ID profile from the other side of his own ship. He had turned the Houndstooth around just in time to see the huge, churning ball of flame fill his view screen. But, he realized now, he hadn't seen Slave One itself. Which meant... Bossk heard another sound, even softer, coming from somewhere else in his own ship. "He's here. Boba Fett." Somehow, Bossk knew the explosion hadn't consumed Slave One and its occupants at all, and the deafening electronic noise that had filled the cockpit had also been enough to cover Boba Fett's unauthorized entry of the Houndstooth. A voice came from the cockpit's overhead speaker, a voice that was neither his own nor Boba Fett's.
20 seconds to detonation.
It was the calm, unexcited voice of an autonomic bomb. Only the most powerful ones contained warning circuits like that. Bossk dove for the hatchway behind him. In the emergency equipment bay, his clawed hands tore through the contents of one of the storage lockers and hastily shoved a few essential items through the self-sealing gasket of a battered pressure duffel.
"I'm out of here,"
thought Bossk.
15 seconds to detonation.
The calm and friendly voice spoke in the Hound's central corridor as Bossk ran for the escape pod. Under the death fear that accelerated his pulse was sheer murderous rage and annoyance, the inevitable result of every encounter he'd had with Boba Fett.
That stinking, underhanded barf. Was there no way to kill him so that he would just stay dead? 12.
Bossk wiped all thoughts other than self-preservation from his mind. The point of his claw hit the big red button for which he had been aiming. With a sharp hiss, the escape pod's hatch slid open. He threw the pressure duffel inside, then scrambled in after it. Outside the pod, he could hear muffled clanking and creaking sounds as the Hound's machinery rotated the pod into eject position.
"Come on,"
Bosk's voice grated in his throat. Then his spine was suddenly jammed back against the hatch behind him as an intense burst of thruster fire shot the pod out into space and away from the ship. The stars shifted disorientingly in the viewport as the pod rolled to one side. Squeezing his eyes shut, Bossk wondered what number the bomb's countdown had reached.
4,
said the calm, familiar voice of the bomb.
"It's in here."
Boba Fett had planted the bomb inside the escape pod.
3.
A surge of adrenaline coursed through the Trandoshan's body. His claws raked across the pod's interior, scrabbling to find the explosive device.
2.
The unhurried voice came from a small blue cube. Frantically, Bossk looked about for some way to eject the box from the escape pod. There wasn't any.
1.
Bossk turned his face away for all the good that would do and thrust the bomb against the opposite side of the pod, near the tiny viewport. Nothing happened. He was still alive. Slowly, Bossk brought his gaze back around to the blue cube. He cautiously inserted the point of one claw and pried it open. The only contents were a miniaturized speaker and a few pre-programmed vocal circuits. It hadn't been a bomb at all, and he hadn't felt the impact of a bomb in the distance outside the escape pod, so there probably hadn't been one placed aboard the Houndstooth either, of any size or destructive capability. If he hadn't given in to panic and hadn't abandoned the Hound, if he had stayed there and had gone toe-to-toe with Boba Fett, he might have settled his accounts with the underhanded scum once and for all, and still have been in possession of his own ship. Now, where was he? The pod's navigational circuits appeared to be in operative condition. They had already locked onto Tatooine, the nearest habitable destination. The planet's familiar image now filled the viewport. As he shifted position inside the pod, the contents of the pressure duffel poked him in the ribs. At least he had managed to get some things off the Houndstooth. Valuable things. Whether he would be able to profit from what he'd salvaged, that remained to be seen. As the surface details of Tatooine grew larger in the viewport, Bosk's thoughts turned ever darker and more murderous. On the great list of grievances that he kept next to his heart, every one with Boba Fett's name attached, another entry had been made.